Sarah Martinez stepped off the city bus in front of the Riverside Police Academy, her worn combat boots hitting the concrete with quiet confidence. At 32, she carried herself with the measured grace of someone who'd seen too much but refused to break. The California sun beat down on the imposing training facility as she adjusted the duffel bag on her shoulder, her veteran ID tucked safely in her wallet. This wasn't supposed to be her life. 6 months ago, she'd been Sergeant Martinez of the 82nd Airborne, leading convoys through hostile territory in Afghanistan. Now she was just another civilian trying to find her place in a world that suddenly felt foreign. The nightmares from roadside bombs still jolted her awake most nights, and her therapist at the VA had suggested finding structure again, something familiar yet different. Lieutenant Kevin Walsh, her former commanding officer, who'd transitioned to the LAPD years earlier, had thrown her a lifeline. "Sarah, you've got skills these SWAT trainees can only dream of," he'd told her over coffee. "Come train with them. See if law enforcement feels right. Maybe it'll help both sides." The Academy's motto, "To protect and to serve," gleamed on a polished sign near the entrance. Sarah paused, reading it silently. Protection. Service. Those words had meant everything to her once. Maybe they could again. Inside, a board administrator barely looked up from his paperwork as he directed her to the training grounds. Walking through the corridors, Sarah caught fragments of conversations from passing recruits. "Did you hear about the army chick joining us? Why would they let a civilian into SWAT training? Probably some diversity thing." She kept her chin up, father's voice echoing in her memory. "Mia, they can try to define you, but only you get to decide who you are." The training ground sprawled. Before her, obstacle courses, rappelling towers, and in the distance, a firing range where the sharp crack of gunshots punctuated the afternoon air. A group of trainees jogged past in formation, some shooting curious glances her way. "Martinez!" a gruff voice called out. Sarah turned to see Instructor Robert Torres approaching, his weathered face unreadable beneath his LAPD cap. His nameplate caught the sunlight as he looked her up and down, taking in her pressed cargo pants and military-style posture. "You're early," he stated, neither approval nor disapproval in his tone. "Didn't want to start off on the wrong foot, sir?" Torres grunted. "The group you'll be training with is finishing up orientation. We'll see what you're made of soon enough." He pointed to a concrete building near the field's edge. "Stow your gear." "Over there. Be back here in 10. Sarah nodded and made her way to the building. Inside, the familiar smell of disinfectant and sweat reminded her of army barracks, oddly comforting in its sterility. She placed her bag in an empty locker, took a deep breath, and tried to quiet the voice in her head that whispered she didn't belong here. A sharp whistle pierced the air outside. Sarah stepped back into the blazing sun to see Torres waving her toward a group of sweaty, wide-eyed trainees. As she approached, the group parted slightly and she felt the weight of their stares, some curious, others openly skeptical. "Listen up," Torres bellowed. "This is Sarah Martinez. She's ex-military with specialized training that might teach you a thing or two. Pay attention and maybe you'll learn something." The reaction was immediate. Several trainees stiffened, clearly uncomfortable with the implication that some outsider might outperform them. Others crossed their arms, expressions saying, "We'll see about that." But it was the tall, muscular blonde man in the front who caught Sarah's attention. His nameplate read Breedley, and his cocky smirk suggested he viewed her as entertainment rather than competition. Derek Bradley was everything Sarah had encountered before in training environments. The natural alpha who'd probably never been challenged by anyone he didn't respect. His arms were thick as tree trunks, his jaw sharp and confident. When Torres announced they'd start with the obstacle course and paired Sarah with Bradley, his grin widened. "Want me to show you how it's done first?" Bradley asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Might help you get a feel for our standards here." Sarah kept her voice level. "I'll time you. Show me what you got." Bradley chuckled, flexing his shoulders. "Hope you brought a good stopwatch. You're about to see the course record get broken." As Bradley strutted to the starting line, Sarah noticed the other trainees gathering around. Some looked eager to see the show, others seemed nervous about what was coming. She checked her stopwatch and tried to ignore the knot forming in her stomach. She hadn't asked to be the center of attention, but here she was. The whistle blew, and Bradley exploded forward with impressive speed and raw power. He attacked each obstacle with the kind of aggressive confidence that had probably served him well his entire life. Wall climbs, rope bridges, tire runs, he bulldozed through them all with brute force efficiency. When he crossed the finish line, breathing hard but triumphant, Sarah clicked her stopwatch. "Time!" he panted, hands on his hips. 2 minutes! 51 seconds! Bradley's grin was radiant. Not bad for a warm-up run. He gestured theatrically at the course. "Your turn, Army girl. Let's see what you got." Sarah handed him the stopwatch and walked to the starting line. She could feel every eye on her, could practically hear the silent bets being placed. In that moment, standing at the edge of the course, she felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that had carried her through countless missions overseas. "This is what I do best," she reminded herself. "This is who I am." When Torres shouted, "Go!" Sarah didn't just run, she flowed. Years of ranger training kicked in as she approached each obstacle with fluid precision rather than Bradley's brute force approach. She scaled walls with efficient grace, danced across rope bridges with perfect balance, and navigated the tire section with short, sure strides that never wasted energy. By the time she reached the monkey bars, murmurs were rippling through the crowd. She gripped the first bar and used momentum to skip every other rung, landing light as a cat before sprinting the final stretch. The whistle cut through the air. Sarah turned, chest heaving, to see Bradley staring at the stopwatch with his mouth slightly open. "Time," Torres called out. Bradley looked up, his cocky expression replaced by something closer to shock. 2 minutes, 34 seconds. Silence fell over the group like a heavy blanket. 17 seconds faster than Bradley's run, and she'd made it look effortless. Torres scribbled on his clipboard, his expression unchanged. "Bradley, you done showing off? Maybe pay attention and learn something." Bradley's face flushed red, but he managed a tight nod. "Yes, sir." It was only the first test, but Sarah could feel the shift in the air around her. The dismissive glances had been replaced by something more complex. Respect mixed with resentment, curiosity tinged with threat. She'd proven she wasn't here to play, but she'd also painted a target on her back. As the group dispersed for their next training module, Sarah caught Bradley's eye. For just a moment, she saw past his bruised ego to something deeper. The fear of being displaced, of losing the status he'd worked so hard to build. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Firing lines and battle lines. The locker room felt like a pressure cooker after Sarah's obstacle course performance. She sat alone on a bench, carefully untying her boots, while conversations buzzed around her in hushed tones. "Did you see how she moved through those tires? Like she'd done it 1,000 times. Bradley usually sets the standard. She beat him by almost 20 seconds. She's not even part of the academy, right? Just some army grunt they're letting train with us." "Army grunt who apparently outruns all of us?" someone muttered back, drawing nervous laughter. Sarah kept her head down, focusing on her laces. She'd been through this dance before, the mixture of grudging respect and territorial resentment that came with being the outsider who performed too well too fast. A shadow fell across her bench. Sarah looked up to see an athletic woman with dark hair and kind eyes extending her hand. "Hey, I'm Lisa Chen. Hell of a run out there." Sarah shook the offered hand gratefully. "Thanks, Sarah Martinez." Lisa sat down across from her, lowering her voice. "Don't let the cold shoulders get to you. Most of these guys have been training together for months. They're not used to someone coming in and making it look easy. I didn't mean to ruffle feathers," Sarah said, though part of her knew that wasn't entirely true. She'd wanted to prove herself, maybe more aggressively than necessary. "Trust me, some feathers needed ruffling." Lisa glanced toward the group of trainees gathered around Bradley, especially his. Derek's been coasting on natural ability and intimidation for too long. Before Sarah could respond, Torres's voice boomed from the doorway. "Gear up! We're moving to the firing range in 5 minutes." Sarah's pulse quickened. If the obstacle course was her warm-up, the firing range was her home field. She'd spent countless hours on military ranges, from basic M4 rifles to advanced sniper systems. The weight of a weapon in her hands, the dance of breath control and trigger discipline, it was as natural as walking. The LAPD firing range was impressive, state-of-the-art electronic scoring systems tracking every shot, pop-up targets, moving platforms, and simulated scenarios designed to test both accuracy and decision-making under pressure. Torres gestured to a table laden with weapons. "Today we're working with standard-issue Glock 17s, then moving to AR-15 platforms. You'll be scored on accuracy, speed, and scenario response." The trainees lined up at their stations with eager anticipation. Sarah noticed Bradley positioning himself 2 lanes over, close enough to watch her performance while maintaining the pretense of focusing on his own shooting. When Bradley's turn came, he approached the line with renewed confidence. Firearms were clearly his strong suit. His stance was solid, his groupings tight and controlled. The electronic scoreboard flashed respectable numbers as he worked through the course of fire. "Good shooting, Bradley," Torres called out. "Clean groups, good tempo." Bradley's grin returned as he stepped back, clearly feeling he'd reclaimed some ground. He made a show of examining his target, pointing out his tight shot patterns to nearby trainees. Then it was Sarah's turn. She picked up the Glock, immediately noting its balance and trigger weight. The familiar heft settled into her, hands like greeting an old friend. She'd fired thousands of rounds through similar platforms in conditions ranging from desert sandstorms to freezing mountain ranges. At Torres's command, she began the course of fire. Each shot was deliberate, controlled, precise. The pop-up targets fell in rapid succession, center mass shots followed by headshots, close range followed by distance. Her breathing never wavered, her stance never shifted. The electronic scoreboard began lighting up with scores that made the gathered trainees exchange glances. When Sarah finished, setting the weapon down with the same calm precision she'd shown. Throughout, Torres actually paused in his note-taking. "Outstanding marksmanship," he said simply, but Sarah caught the hint of respect in his voice. The scores told the story. Sarah's accuracy percentage was nearly perfect, her time significantly faster than Bradley's, and her overall performance set a new standard for the class. Bradley's jaw was tight as he stared at the scoreboard. When the group moved to AR-15 platforms, Sarah could feel his eyes on her, watching for any sign of weakness or uncertainty. But if anything, the rifle felt even more natural. Sarah's muscle memory kicked in from years of combat deployments, and her performance was flawless. controlled bursts, seamless reloads, perfect target engagement. By lunch break, a clear divide had formed in the group. Some trainees, led by Lisa, were openly impressed and curious about Sarah's background. Others, clearly in Bradley's camp, wore expressions of barely concealed hostility. At lunch, Bradley made his move. He walked past Sarah's table, tray in hand, and paused just long enough to deliver his message. "Nice shooting," he said, his tone carefully neutral, but his eyes cold. But SWAT isn't just about putting holes in paper targets. This isn't Afghanistan. Real police work requires different skills. Sarah looked up from her sandwich, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm aware of that. That's why I'm here, to learn." Bradley lingered, clearly expecting more of a reaction. When Sarah simply returned to her meal, he moved on, but his message was clear. The obstacle course and firing range might be her territory, but he wasn't conceding the war. The afternoon brought tactical movement drills, room-clearing exercises, and scenario-based training. Some of it was familiar to Sarah from her military experience, but much was new. Law enforcement protocols, civilian safety considerations, rules of engagement that differed significantly from combat operations. It was during a building clearing exercise that the tension finally boiled over. The trainees were divided into teams and tasked with searching a mock structure for armed suspects while protecting simulated hostages. Sarah found herself partnered with Bradley and 2 others. The irony wasn't lost on her, forced to work with the person who clearly wanted her to fail. As they entered the building, Bradley took point without discussion, his body language making it clear he considered himself the team leader. Sarah fell into position behind him, weapon ready, scanning for threats. The first room cleared without incident, but in the second, a pop-up target appeared suddenly from behind a partition. Bradley, caught off guard, hesitated for a crucial second. Sarah, reading the situation instantly, smoothly shifted her angle and engaged the target with 2 precise shots before it could fire on their team. "Target down!" Sarah called out, already scanning for additional threats. Bradley's face was thunderous as they continued through the building. At the debrief, Torres noted Sarah's quick thinking and decisive action, while Bradley received criticism for his hesitation and lack of situational awareness. "Good instincts, Martinez," Torres said. "You read that situation perfectly and took appropriate action." Bradley's humiliation was complete when Torres added, "Bradley, next time trust your team. This isn't a solo sport." As they cleaned their weapons and gear afterward, Sarah could feel the weight of Bradley's stare. She'd embarrassed him twice in one day, and she knew he wouldn't let it slide. The question was how far he'd be willing to go to restore his reputation. Lisa approached as Sarah was finishing up. "You handled that building drill perfectly," she said quietly. "But watch your back. Derek doesn't like being shown up, and he's got friends here." Sarah nodded, securing her weapon. She'd made her point today. She belonged here, and she could hold her own against anyone, but she'd also made enemies, and in a tight-knit group like this, that could be dangerous. As she headed to her car that evening, Sarah caught sight of Bradley huddled with 2 other trainees near the parking lot. Their conversation stopped when they saw her, but their expressions made it clear she was the topic of discussion. The steep battle lines were drawn, and tomorrow would bring new challenges. Sarah just hoped she was ready for whatever Bradley had planned. The sabotage. Sarah arrived at the academy the next morning to find her locker had been tampered with. Her gear was still there, but it had been rearranged, searched through. Nothing was missing, but the message was clear. They were watching her, looking for weakness. The morning briefing carried an unusual tension. Torres announced that today's training would focus on advanced tactical scenarios, including a high-pressure hostage simulation that would test everything they'd learned so far. More importantly, the exercise would be observed by several LAPD commanders who were evaluating the program's effectiveness. This isn't just training, Torres emphasized. How you perform today goes in your permanent files. Screw this up, and it could affect your entire career. Sarah felt the weight of those words differently than the others. She wasn't seeking a career with LAPD. She was still figuring out if law enforcement was right for her at all. But she also understood that failure here would reflect poorly on Lieutenant Walsh, who'd stuck his neck out to get her this opportunity. The scenario was complex. Armed suspects had taken hostages in a multi-story building. Teams would be assigned different entry points and objectives, requiring precise coordination and communication. The exercise would be monitored by cameras, with every decision and action recorded for later review. As Torres announced team assignments, Sarah felt her heart sink. She was placed on a team with Bradley and two of his closest allies in the SWAT program, Jake Morrison and Tony Ricci. The three had been thick as thieves since day one, and Sarah knew this wasn't coincidence. "Looks like we're working together," Bradley said as they gathered their gear, his tone superficially friendly, but his eyes cold. "Hope you can follow orders as well as you shoot." The implication was clear. He was positioning himself as team leader, despite no official designation. Sarah bit back her response, knowing that causing friction before the exercise would only hurt her evaluation. Their assignment was to clear the building's second floor and locate a high-value hostage supposedly held there. The team would enter from an exterior stairwell and work systematically through multiple rooms. As they suited up in tactical gear, Sarah noticed Morrison whispering something to Ricci, who then glanced at her equipment with an odd expression. A chill ran down her spine, but she couldn't identify what felt wrong. The exercise began with all teams moving to their positions. Sarah's team climbed the exterior stairs in formation, Bradley in the lead, Sarah bringing up the rear. At the door to the second floor, Bradley held up his hand for silence. "Remember," he whispered, "I call the shots. We move as a unit, clear each room systematically. Don't get heroic." The last comment was directed at Sarah, and she nodded tightly. They breached the door and entered a narrow hallway lined with doors on both sides. The building was dark, lit only by emergency lighting that cast eerie shadows. They approached the first room cautiously. Bradley signaled for Morrison and Ricci to flank the door, while he and Sarah provided cover. The door was locked, requiring a breaching charge. That's when things went wrong. As Morrison prepared the charge, Sarah's radio crackled with static instead of clear communication. She tried to adjust the frequency but got only garbled noise. A quick check revealed that her radio had been set to the wrong channel. She was completely cut off from team communication. "My radio's not working," she whispered to Bradley. He looked at her with feigned surprise. "That's odd." "Must be equipment failure. We'll have to proceed without you being able to coordinate with base." Sarah's suspicion crystallized, but there was no time to address it. The breach was about to begin, and she needed to be ready. The door exploded inward with the simulated charge, and the team flowed into the room. Immediately, they were met with paintball fire from multiple concealed positions. In the chaos, Sarah realized that the room layout wasn't what their briefing had indicated. Someone had given them faulty intelligence. Bradley, Morrison, and Ricci moved with suspicious coordination, almost as if they knew where the threats would be. Sarah, operating without radio communication and with incorrect room intelligence, found herself isolated and exposed. A paintball caught her in the shoulder, marking her as wounded. Another hit her leg. According to exercise rules, she was now critically injured, and could only provide limited support. "Martinez is down," Bradley called out, his voice carrying a note of false concern. "We'll have to complete the mission without her." But Sarah wasn't finished. Even wounded, she could still observe and assess. What she saw made her blood boil. Bradley, Morrison, and Ricci were moving through the building with the confidence of people who knew exactly where every threat and hostage was located. Their surprise encounters weren't surprises at all. They'd had access to the exercise plans. They'd deliberately given her faulty equipment and intelligence. This wasn't just hazing, it was sabotage designed to make her fail spectacularly in front of the LAPD commanders. As the exercise continued, Sarah made mental notes of every suspicious action, every too convenient discovery, every moment when her teammates seemed to know more than they should. She was building a case, piece by piece. The final insult came when they rescued the hostage. Bradley made sure to position himself prominently for the cameras, while Morrison and Ricci flanked him heroically. Sarah, relegated to the background due to her injuries, watched as they took credit for a mission they'd rigged from the start. When the exercise ended and teams returned to the debriefing area, Sarah's anger was ice-cold and controlled. She'd been set up, humiliated, and sabotaged, but more importantly, she now understood exactly what kind of people she was dealing with. The commanders conducting the evaluation praised Bradley's team for their textbook execution and outstanding teamwork. Bradley basked in the praise while shooting Sarah meaningful glances, his message clear: "This is what happens when you try to upstage us." But as the group dispersed, Sarah noticed one person who hadn't been fooled. Torres approached her quietly, his expression unreadable. "Equipment problems?" he asked simply. "Something like that," Sarah replied carefully. Torres nodded slowly. "Funny how equipment problems always seem to happen to certain people. You might want to be extra careful with your gear from now on." It wasn't much, but it was acknowledgement that he'd seen through the charade. Sarah realized she might have an ally in her corner after all. That evening, as she sat in her small apartment reviewing the day's events, Sarah made a decision. She'd been playing defense since arriving at the academy, trying to fit in and prove herself worthy. But Bradley and his friends had escalated this beyond simple rivalry. If they wanted a war, she'd give them one, but she'd fight it on her terms, using her strengths and their weaknesses against them. She'd been a combat veteran before she was a police trainee, and she knew how to win battles that mattered. The next phase of training was beginning soon, advanced marksmanship trials that would test skills under extreme pressure. Bradley had made his move during the tactical exercise. Now it was Sarah's turn to show him what a real soldier could do when cornered. She spent the rest of the evening cleaning her personal weapons and planning her counterattack. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. Gathering intelligence. The weekend break gave Sarah time to strategize. While her fellow trainees likely spent their time off relaxing or socializing, she used the 48 hours to conduct reconnaissance of a different kind. Her target wasn't a building or terrain feature, it was the Academy's own systems and policies. Saturday morning found her in the Academy's library, a small room tucked away on the second floor that most trainees ignored. Sarah had always been thorough, whether planning a mission in Afghanistan or studying for advancement exams, and this situation required the same methodical approach. She started with the Academy's official training manual, paying particular attention to sections on equipment accountability, exercise procedures, and evaluation protocols. What she found was revealing. Every piece of training equipment was supposed to be checked and logged before exercises, and any discrepancies had to be reported immediately. More interesting was the Academy's policy on training integrity. There were strict rules about sharing exercise details in advance, and violations were grounds for immediate dismissal from the program. The manual made it clear that the LAPD took these protocols seriously. Sarah also discovered something Bradley and his friends probably didn't know. All training exercises were recorded by multiple cameras for safety and legal liability purposes. Those recordings were kept for 90 days and could be reviewed by Academy administration upon request. Sunday afternoon, she made a trip to a military surplus store across town. She needed her own equipment, gear she could trust that couldn't be tampered with. The elderly store owner, himself a Vietnam veteran, helped her select a high-quality radio and other tactical equipment. "Getting back in the game?" he asked as she made her purchases. "Something like that," Sarah replied. "Just want to make sure. My gear works when I need it to." Monday morning brought news that made Sarah's pulse quicken. Torres announced that the week would culminate in the advanced marksmanship trial, a grueling test of precision shooting under pressure that was considered the Academy's most challenging individual exercise. "This isn't just about hitting targets," Torres explained to the assembled trainees. "You'll be moving through multiple stations, engaging threats while protecting civilians, making split-second decisions under time pressure. Your score on this trial becomes part of your permanent record." Sarah noticed the competitive gleam in Bradley's eye. Marksmanship was where he felt strongest, where he'd been dominant before her arrival. She could almost see him calculating that this was his chance to reclaim his status. What Bradley didn't know was that Sarah had spent Sunday evening researching the trial's history. The Academy kept detailed records of past performances, and the current high score belonged to Detective Michael Santos, a SWAT veteran who'd set the record 3 years earlier with a score of 294 out of 300. Bradley's best recorded score was 287. Impressive, but not record-breaking. Sarah studied Santos's approach, his technique, the specific areas where points were typically lost. She was preparing for war, and knowledge was her best weapon. The week's training leading up to the trial was intense, with scenarios designed to test skills that would be evaluated on Friday. Sarah noticed that Bradley seemed unusually confident, even cocky, during the practice sessions. His supporters were equally buoyant, making comments about showing the outsider where she really belonged. Wednesday brought another red flag. During equipment checkout, Sarah discovered that her assigned rifle had a sight that was slightly off, not enough to be immediately obvious but sufficient to throw off precision shots at distance. When she brought it to the attention of the equipment sergeant, he seemed genuinely surprised. "That's odd," he said, examining the weapon. "This rifle was zeroed just last week. Let me get you a different one." Sarah made note of the serial number and who had checked out that rifle before her. The pattern was becoming clear. Bradley and his allies weren't just content to sabotage her during exercises. They were playing a longer game, trying to undermine her equipment and preparation for the trial. That evening, Sarah decided it was time to make some allies of her own. She approached Lisa in the parking lot after training. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "Have you noticed anything unusual about equipment issues lately?" Lisa glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. "You mean like how certain people seem to have problems with their gear right before important exercises?" "Yeah. I've noticed. Has it happened to you once?" "During the urban warfare simulation 2 weeks ago. My radio mysteriously lost battery power right before a crucial communication check." Lisa's expression hardened. "I couldn't prove anything, but the timing was suspicious." Sarah nodded. "What do you know about Friday's marksmanship trial?" "It's the big one. The exercise that separates the contenders from the pretenders." "Why?" "Just want to make sure I'm prepared." Sarah paused, then decided to trust Lisa with part of her suspicion. I think some people are going to try to make sure I'm not. Lisa was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. If you need someone watching your back, let me know. I don't like bullies, and I especially don't like cheaters. That night, Sarah called. Lieutenant Walsh. She needed guidance from someone who understood both the military and law enforcement cultures. Sir, I have a situation I need to discuss with you, she began, then outlined the sabotage attempts without mentioning names. Walsh listened quietly, then asked pointed questions about the incidents and Sarah's evidence. His years of experience showed in his methodical approach to the problem. Sarah, you're dealing with something that exists in every competitive environment, he said finally. The question is whether you want to fight it head-on or outmaneuver it. What do you recommend? Document everything, build an unshakable case, and don't let them see you sweat. The best revenge is success they can't argue with or explain away. Thursday evening, Sarah made her final preparations. She'd brought her own equipment, checked and double-checked every piece of gear, and even arranged for Lisa to witness her equipment preparation as an additional safeguard. The advanced marksmanship trial would test everything she'd learned, both as a soldier and as a student of human nature. Bradley thought he was playing chess while she was playing checkers. He was about to learn the difference between tactics and strategy. As she cleaned her personal rifle that night, Sarah reflected on how much this moment meant. It wasn't just about proving herself to the academy or even defeating Bradley's sabotage. It was about reclaiming her confidence, showing herself that she still had the skills and determination that had carried her through combat. Tomorrow would tell the story. Either she'd validate Bradley's efforts to undermine her, or she'd demonstrate that a true professional couldn't be defeated by petty games and equipment tampering. She was ready for the fight of her academy life. The perfect score. Friday morning arrived with crisp autumn air and the kind of crystalline clarity that Sarah had always associated with important missions. The advanced marksmanship trial was scheduled for 900 hours, and the entire academy seemed charged with anticipation. Sarah arrived early, as was her habit, to find the range already bustling with activity. Instructors were making final checks on equipment and target systems, while early arriving trainees clustered in nervous groups discussing strategy and psyching themselves up for the challenge ahead. The trial course was intimidating even by LAPD standards. It consisted of 8 stations, each designed to test a different aspect of marksmanship under pressure: long-range precision, close-quarters accuracy, moving targets, shoot, don't shoot scenarios, and tactical reloads under fire. Trainees would move through the course individually with their performance broadcast on monitors for everyone to watch. Sarah had brought her own rifle, a precision instrument she'd maintained meticulously throughout her military service. She'd also taken the precaution of having Lisa witness her equipment check, creating an undeniable chain of custody that would prevent any last-minute sabotage. Torres gathered the group for the final briefing. "You'll draw lots for shooting order," he announced. "Remember, this isn't just about accuracy. We're evaluating decision-making, speed, tactical awareness, and grace under pressure. Every shot is recorded, every decision analyzed." The lot drawing produced an interesting result. Bradley would shoot third, putting him early enough to set a strong benchmark, but late enough to have warmed up on other shooters' performances. Sarah drew the final slot, last to shoot, with everyone's scores already posted for comparison. As the first trainee began the course, Sarah found a quiet corner to center herself. She closed her eyes and ran through breathing exercises she'd learned during sniper training, slowing her heart rate and sharpening her focus. When she opened her eyes, she caught Bradley staring at her with an odd expression, part confidence, part uncertainty. "Nervous?" he asked, walking over. "Focused," Sarah replied simply. "Smart strategy," Going last, you'll know exactly what score you need to beat." His tone was conversational, but Sarah detected an underlying tension. "I'm not shooting against anyone else's score," Sarah said calmly. "I'm shooting for perfection." Bradley's laugh was forced. "Perfection? That's a pretty high standard. Even Santos's record has room for improvement." The first shooter finished with a respectable score of 267. The second managed 271. Then it was Bradley's turn, and Sarah could see him shifting into his competition mindset, the swagger and confidence that had intimidated so many other trainees. Bradley approached the line with theatrical flair, checking his weapon with exaggerated precision for the cameras. When the buzzer sounded, he exploded into action with impressive speed and aggression. At the first station, long-range precision shooting, Bradley's technique was solid. His groupings were tight, his positions textbook. The scoreboard showed strong numbers as he moved to Station 2. The close-quarters drill favored his aggressive style. Bradley attacked the targets with controlled fury, his shots rapid and accurate. Sarah had to admit he was good. Very good. By Station 4, Bradley was on pace for a career performance. His supporters in the gallery were getting excited, whispering about record scores and vindication. Sarah watched impassively, noting his technique, his timing, his decision-making process. The shoot, don't shoot scenario at Station 6 was where Bradley almost stumbled. A series of pop-up targets included civilians mixed with armed threats, requiring split-second identification and decision-making. Bradley hesitated fractionally on one target, a civilian holding a cell phone that could have been mistaken for a weapon. He made the right call, but the hesitation cost him precious time. When Bradley completed the course, his final score flashed on the board, 291 out of 300. It was the highest score of the day, just 3 points shy of Santos's record. The gallery erupted in applause, and Bradley raised his rifle triumphantly. "Hell of a score," Torres called out. "That's going to be tough to beat." The remaining shooters tried valiantly, but none came close. Scores ranged from 208 to 276, all respectable, but nowhere near Bradley's performance. As the final shooter, before Sarah finished with 265, the mood in the gallery became celebratory for Bradley's camp. "Looks like Bradley's got this one locked up," someone said, loudly enough for Sarah to hear. "Army training versus LAPD training," another voice added. "Guess we know which one matters here." Sarah ignored the comments, focusing on her final equipment check. Everything was perfect, rifle zeroed, magazines loaded, gear secure. She'd run through this course 100 times in her mind, visualizing every station, every target, every decision point. When Torres called her name, Sarah walked to the line with quiet confidence. The gallery fell silent, all eyes on the outsider who'd caused so much disruption since her arrival. "Ready when you are, Martinez," Torres said. Sarah took a deep breath, settled into her stance, and waited for the buzzer. When it sounded, she moved with fluid precision that looked deceptively effortless. Station 1, long-range precision. Sarah's shots were surgical, each one placed with mechanical accuracy. Where Bradley had been fast and aggressive, Sarah was smooth and methodical. The scoreboard registered perfect hits. Station 2, close quarters. Instead of Bradley's rapid-fire approach, Sarah used controlled pairs, each shot placed with deliberate precision. Her time was actually faster, despite the apparently slower pace. At Station 3, the moving targets challenged shooters to track and engage threats while maintaining accuracy. Sarah's military training in dynamic environments showed as she smoothly tracked each target, leading them perfectly and placing shots with mechanical precision. Station 4 tested tactical reloading under simulated fire. Sarah's reload was lightning fast, muscle memory from countless combat situations taking over. She dropped to cover, executed a combat reload, and engaged the next series of targets, without missing a beat. By Station 5, murmurs were rippling through the gallery. Sarah's score was climbing steadily, each station adding perfect or near-perfect points to her total. What was more impressive was her composure. She moved through the course as if she designed it herself. Station 6, the shoot, don't shoot, scenario that had given Bradley trouble. Sarah approached it with the patience of someone who'd made life-and-death decisions under fire. Each target received careful assessment before engagement. Civilians, with cell phone, no shoot. Armed suspect behind cover, precise headshot. Armed suspect using human shield, body shot that avoided the hostage. Perfect score. Zero hesitation, flawless execution. The gallery was completely silent now except for the electronic beeps of the scoring system. Even Bradley's supporters were watching with grudging awe as Sarah demonstrated a level of skill that transcended training and entered the realm of artistry. Station 7 tested shooting from unconventional positions, prone, standing, kneeling, even inverted around barriers. Sarah flowed from position to position like water, her rifle becoming an extension of her body. Years of combat in Afghanistan, shooting from rooftops, vehicle positions and improvised cover had prepared her for exactly this kind of challenge. As Sarah approached the final station, a complex scenario combining elements from all previous stations, the tension in the gallery was palpable. Bradley stood with his arms crossed, his earlier confidence replaced by tight-lipped concern. The final station was brutal. Multiple targets at varying distances, civilians mixed with threats, time pressure, and the requirement to make tactical decisions while maintaining perfect shot placement. It was designed to break down even experienced shooters under pressure. Sarah surveyed the station layout, formulating her approach in seconds. When the targets began their sequence, she moved like a dancer, flowing from position to position, engaging threats in order of priority while protecting civilians. Her shots were precise, economical, devastating. When the final target fell and Sarah lowered her rifle, the silence in the gallery was deafening. Everyone stared at the scoreboard, waiting for the final tally. Time, 8 minutes, 47 seconds, faster than Bradley by over a minute. Accuracy, 99.7%, only one shot, slightly outside the perfect zone. Decision-making, perfect, every shoot, don't shoot, call, correct. Overall score, 289 out of 300. The scoreboard display seemed to hang in the air like a challenge. Sarah had not only beaten Bradley's performance, she had obliterated the Academy record by 5 points, setting a new standard that would likely stand for years. The gallery erupted in chaos. Some trainees applauded genuinely, impressed by the display of skill. Others stared in shock, unable to process what they'd witnessed. Bradley's face was a mask of humiliation and rage. Torres approached Sarah, his usual stoic expression cracked by something that might have been amazement. Outstanding performance, Martinez. That's the finest shooting I've seen in 20 years of law enforcement. Sarah nodded, adrenaline still, coursing through her system. Thank you, sir. As she began breaking down her equipment, Bradley approached. His earlier swagger was gone, replaced by barely controlled anger. Lucky day, he said quietly, his voice tight. Sarah looked up from her rifle case. Luck had nothing to do with it. The lot drawing produced an interesting result. Bradley would shoot third, putting him early enough to set a strong benchmark, but late enough to have warmed up on other shooters' performances. Sarah drew the final slot, last to shoot, with Everyone's scores already posted for comparison. As the first trainee began the course, Sarah found a quiet corner to center herself. She closed her eyes and ran through breathing exercises she'd learned during sniper training, slowing her heart rate and sharpening her focus. When she opened her eyes, she caught Bradley staring at her with an odd expression. Part confidence, part uncertainty. "Nervous?" he asked, walking over. "Focused," Sarah replied simply. "Smart strategy, going last. You'll know exactly what score you need to beat." His tone was conversational, but Sarah detected an underlying tension. "I'm not shooting against anyone else's score," Sarah said calmly. "I'm shooting for perfection." Bradley's laugh was forced. "Perfection? That's a pretty high standard. Even Santos's record has room for improvement." The first shooter finished with a respectable score of 267. The second managed 271. Then it was Bradley's turn, and Sarah could see him shifting into his competition mindset, the swagger and confidence that had intimidated so many other trainees. Bradley approached the line with theatrical flair, checking his weapon with exaggerated precision for the cameras. When the buzzer sounded, he exploded into action with impressive speed and aggression. At the first station, long-range precision shooting, Bradley's technique was solid. His groupings were tight, his positions textbook. The scoreboard showed strong numbers as he moved to Station 2. The close-quarters drill favored his aggressive style. Bradley attacked the targets with controlled fury, his shots rapid and accurate. Sarah had to admit he was good, very good. By Station 4, Bradley was on pace for a career performance. His supporters in the gallery were getting excited, whispering about record scores and vindication. Sarah watched impassively, noting his technique, his timing, his decision-making process. The shoot, don't shoot scenario at Station 6 was where Bradley almost stumbled. A series of pop-up targets included civilians mixed with armed threats, requiring split-second identification and decision-making. Bradley hesitated fractionally on one target, a civilian holding a cell phone that could have been mistaken for a weapon. He made the right call, but the hesitation cost him precious time. When Bradley completed the course, his final score flashed on the board, 291 out of 300. It was the highest score of the day, just 3 points shy of Santos's record. The gallery erupted in applause, and Bradley raised his rifle triumphantly. "Hell of a score," Torres called out. "That's going to be tough to beat." The remaining shooters tried valiantly, but none came close. Scores ranged from 208 to 276, all respectable, but nowhere near Bradley's performance. As the final shooter before Sarah finished with 265, the mood in the gallery became celebratory for Bradley's camp. "Looks like Bradley's got this one locked up," someone said, loudly enough for Sarah to hear. "Army training versus LAPD training," another voice added. "Guess we know which one matters here." Sarah ignored the comments, focusing on her final equipment check. Everything was perfect, rifle zeroed, magazines loaded, gear secure. She'd run through this course 100 times in her mind, visualizing every station, every target, every decision point. When Torres called her name, Sarah walked to the line with quiet confidence. The gallery fell silent, all eyes on the outsider who'd caused so much disruption since her arrival. "Ready when you are, Martinez," Torres said. Sarah took a deep breath, settled into her stance, and waited for the buzzer. When it sounded, she moved with fluid precision that looked deceptively effortless. Station 1, long-range precision. Sarah's shots were surgical, each one placed with mechanical accuracy. Where Bradley had been fast and aggressive, Sarah was smooth and methodical. The scoreboard registered perfect hits. Station 2, close quarters. Instead of Bradley's rapid-fire approach, Sarah used controlled pairs, each shot placed with deliberate precision. Her time was actually faster, despite the apparently slower pace. At Station 3, the moving targets challenged shooters to track and engage threats while maintaining accuracy. Sarah's military training in dynamic environments showed as she smoothly tracked each target, leading them perfectly and placing shots with mechanical precision. Station 4 tested tactical reloading under simulated fire. Sarah's reload was lightning fast, muscle memory from countless combat situations taking over. She dropped to cover, executed a combat reload, and engaged the next series of targets, without missing a beat. By Station 5, murmurs were rippling through the gallery. Sarah's score was climbing steadily, each station adding perfect or near-perfect points to her total. What was more impressive was her composure. She moved through the course as if she designed it herself. Station 6, the shoot, don't shoot scenario that had given Bradley trouble. Sarah approached it with the patience of someone who'd made life-and-death decisions under fire. Each target received careful assessment before engagement. Civilians, with cell phone, no shoot. Armed suspect behind cover, precise headshot. Armed suspect using human shield, body shot that avoided the hostage. Perfect score. Zero hesitation, flawless execution. The gallery was completely silent now except for the electronic beeps of the scoring system. Even Bradley's supporters were watching with grudging awe as Sarah demonstrated a level of skill that transcended training and entered the realm of artistry. Station 7 tested shooting from unconventional positions, prone, standing, kneeling, even inverted around barriers. Sarah flowed from position to position like water, her rifle becoming an extension of her body. Years of combat in Afghanistan, shooting from rooftops, vehicle positions and improvised cover had prepared her for exactly this kind of challenge. As Sarah approached the final station, a complex scenario combining elements from all previous stations, the tension in the gallery was palpable. Bradley stood with his arms crossed, his earlier confidence replaced by tight-lipped concern. The final station was brutal. Multiple targets at varying distances, civilians mixed with threats, time pressure, and the requirement to make tactical decisions while maintaining perfect shot placement. It was designed to break down even experienced shooters under pressure. Sarah surveyed the station layout, formulating her approach in seconds. When the targets began their sequence, she moved like a dancer, flowing from position to position, engaging threats in order of priority while protecting civilians. Her shots were precise, economical, devastating. When the final target fell and Sarah lowered her rifle, the silence in the gallery was deafening. Everyone stared at the scoreboard, waiting for the final tally. Time, 8 minutes, 47 seconds, faster than Bradley by over a minute. Accuracy, 99.7%, only one shot, slightly outside the perfect zone. Decision-making, perfect, every shoot, don't shoot, call, correct. Overall score, 289 out of 300. The scoreboard display seemed to hang in the air like a challenge. Sarah had not only beaten Bradley's performance, she had obliterated the Academy record by 5 points, setting a new standard that would likely stand for years. The gallery erupted in chaos. Some trainees applauded genuinely, impressed by the display of skill. Others stared in shock, unable to process what they'd witnessed. Bradley's face was a mask of humiliation and rage. Torres approached Sarah, his usual stoic expression cracked by something that might have been amazement. Outstanding performance, Martinez. That's the finest shooting I've seen in 20 years of law enforcement. Sarah nodded, adrenaline still, coursing through her system. Thank you, sir. As she began breaking down her equipment, Bradley approached. His earlier swagger was gone, replaced by barely controlled anger. "Lucky day," he said quietly, his voice tight. Sarah looked up from her rifle case. Luck had nothing to do with it. They were looking for any excuse to file safety charges against her, charges that would end her academy participation and potentially damage her military record. The building entry went smoothly initially. The first floor cleared without incident, revealing evidence of recent terrorist activity but no active threats. As they prepared to advance to the second floor, Sarah's radio crackled with an update from exercise control. Team 6, be advised, suspect armed with AK-47 reported on second floor, northeast room. Approach with caution. Bradley acknowledged the transmission and signaled for the team to advance. But as they climbed the stairs, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Morrison was hanging back, allowing more distance between himself and the team than proper formation required. Ricci was doing the same thing. They were setting her up for isolation. The second floor hallway stretched before them, lined with doors on both sides. According to their intelligence, the armed suspect was in the third room on the right. Bradley signaled for Kelly and Peters to cover the left side, while he, Sarah, and Morrison approached the target room. That's when things went according to their plan, but not the plan Sarah expected. As they approached the target room, Bradley suddenly stopped and held up his hand. "Martinez," he said loudly enough for his voice to carry clearly. "You're out of position. Move up and take point." It was a violation of their established formation and tactical protocol. The person with the most experience, Bradley, should maintain point position in the most dangerous phase of the operation. But Sarah understood the trap, refused the order, and face insubordination charges, or accept it and be placed in maximum danger where an accident might occur. "Sir, protocol suggests," Sarah began. "I said take point," Bradley interrupted, his voice carrying an edge of authority. "That's an order." Morrison's hand moved to his radio, ready to document Sarah's insubordination if she refused the unsafe order. The trap was perfectly laid. Comply and risk injury or death, refuse, and face disciplinary action. Sarah made her choice. "Copy that," she said calmly, moving past Bradley to the point position. But as she did, she activated her concealed recorder and spoke clearly. "Moving to point position as ordered by team leader Bradley, contrary to established tactical protocol for this scenario." Bradley's eyes narrowed, but it was too late to retract. The order, without looking foolish, Sarah approached the target room with heightened awareness. Every instinct told her this was where they planned their accident, a scenario where Bradley could claim she'd violated safety protocols, been shot by friendly fire, or failed to follow proper procedures. The door to the target room was partially open. According to exercise rules, a terrorist actor was positioned inside with live ammunition blanks that would create realistic muzzle flash and sound without actual projectiles. The danger wasn't from the exercise, it was from her own team. Sarah paused at the door, listening. She could hear movement inside, but something felt wrong. The positioning wasn't right for a standard exercise setup. Then she understood. This wasn't just about getting her injured in an accident. They'd corrupted the exercise itself, possibly bribing or coercing the terrorist actor to deviate from the script in ways that would make Sarah appear incompetent or dangerous. Sarah made a decision that drew on every lesson she'd learned in combat. When facing an ambush, the best response is often to spring it on your own terms. "Suspect confirmed in target room," she announced loudly and clearly. Preparing for room entry, all team members maintain position and provide cover as briefed. Then she did something that violated every tactical manual but perfectly exposed the trap being set for her. Instead of entering the room where the ambush waited, Sarah stepped to the side and called out, "Terrorist actor, please respond with your safety status for exercise control." The response from inside the room was telling. Confused silence, then movement that suggested someone scrambling to recover from an unexpected disruption. Bradley's voice came from behind her, tight with anger. "Martinez, what are you doing? Execute!" The room entry as ordered. Sarah keyed her radio. "Exercise control. Team 6 requesting clarification on suspect positioning. Our intelligence doesn't match observed layout." The response was immediate and revealing. "Team 6, be advised. Exercise. Actor reports he is not in assigned position. Please hold while we verify scenario setup." Bradley realized his plan was unraveling. "Martinez, I gave you a direct order. Enter that room now or face disciplinary action for insubordination." Sarah turned to face him, her expression calm, but her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded soldiers in actual combat. "Sir, I will not execute an unsafe room entry when exercise control has confirmed the scenario setup is compromised. If you want to file insubordination charges for following proper safety protocols, go ahead." Morrison's hand was already moving toward his radio to document the incident, but Sarah's next words stopped him cold. "Before you do that, Morrison, you should know that this entire conversation has been recorded, including Bradley's order for me to violate tactical protocol and execute an unsafe room entry. I'm sure Academy administration will be very interested in reviewing that recording." The color drained from Morrison's face. Bradley's expression shifted from anger to something approaching panic. "Team 6, hold position," came the voice from exercise control. "Exercise is temporarily suspended while we investigate scenario irregularities." Within minutes, Torres and Deputy Chief Roberts arrived with a team of safety officers. The terrorist actor was questioned and admitted he'd been approached by someone claiming to be from administration who'd given him instructions that deviated from the official exercise plan. As the investigation unfolded, Sarah provided her digital recording to Torres. The audio clearly captured Bradley's violation of tactical protocol, his attempts to place Sarah in an unsafe position, and Morrison's obvious intent to document false charges against her. But the final nail in their coffin came from an unexpected source. Kelly, one of the trainees who'd remained silent throughout Bradley's campaign, stepped forward with his own evidence. "Sir," Kelly said to Deputy Chief Roberts, "I need to report some things I've witnessed over the past few weeks." Kelly detailed the equipment sabotage, the coordinated complaints, and Morrison's attempts to recruit trainees to file false charges against Sarah. Most damaging of all, he revealed that Morrison had been bragging about his ability to fix Sarah's academy records through his cousin in administration. Deputy Chief Roberts listened with an expression of growing anger. When Kelly finished, Roberts turned to Torres with a look that could have melted steel. "Instructor Torres, I want a full investigation launched immediately. If these allegations are confirmed, we're looking at conspiracy, filing false official documents, and sabotage of academy training. These are career-ending charges." Bradley made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Sir, this is all a misunderstanding. Martinez has been disruptive since day one, and we were just trying to maintain program standards." "Shut up," Roberts said quietly, but with such authority that Bradley's mouth snapped closed. "Don't say another word until you have legal representation present." As Academy security led Bradley, Morrison, and Ricci away for formal questioning, Sarah felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. She'd won the war, but the victory felt hollow. These men had thrown away promising careers out of petty jealousy and wounded pride. Torres approached her as the scene cleared. "Martinez, you handled that perfectly. Your military training shows you kept your composure under pressure and followed proper procedures, even when ordered to violate them. Deputy Chief Roberts joined them.
Ms. Martinez, I owe you an apology on behalf of the LAPD.
What happened here is completely contrary to our values and standards. I want you to know that this incident will not reflect poorly on your academy record in any way. Sarah nodded. Thank you, sir. I just want to complete my training and see if law enforcement is the right path for me. Robert smiled. From what I've seen today, I think law enforcement would be lucky to have you. When you're ready to make that decision, call me directly. He handed her his business card. We need more
officers with your integrity and skill.
As the academy returned to normal operations over the following days, Sarah found herself in an unexpected position. She was no longer the outsider fighting for acceptance. She was the veteran trainee whom others looked up to and sought advice from. The final week of training passed without incident. Bradley, Morrison, and Ricci had been expelled from the academy and faced potential criminal charges for their actions. Morrison's cousin in administration had also been terminated for his role in the conspiracy. On the last day of training, as Sarah packed her gear for the final time, Torres approached her with an official-looking document. Martinez, this is your academy completion certificate. You finished first in the class in overall performance, setting records that will probably stand for years. Sarah accepted the certificate, but her expression remained thoughtful. Sir, can
I ask you something? Shoot. Did you know what Bradley and his crew were planning?
Torres was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. I suspected something was off. Your equipment failures were too convenient, your team assignments too consistently difficult. But I needed proof before I could act. He paused. I'm glad you were smart enough to document everything and brave enough to stand up for yourself when it mattered. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment reviewing the events of the past few weeks. She'd come to the academy searching for direction, trying to find her place in civilian life after military service. She'd found something more valuable, confirmation that she still had the strength and skill to face any challenge. The next morning would bring a new decision point. Deputy Chief Roberts had made it clear that the LAPD wanted her. Lieutenant Walsh had called to congratulate her on completing the program with distinction. The door to a law enforcement career was wide open, but Sarah had also learned something important about herself during her time at the academy. She didn't need external validation to know her worth. Whether she chose law enforcement, private security, or something else entirely, she would make that choice from a position of strength and confidence. The academy had tested more than her tactical skills. It had tested her character, her resilience, and her ability to overcome adversity. She'd passed every test with distinction. Whatever came next, Sarah Martinez was ready for it. The choice forward. 3 weeks after the academy scandal broke, Sarah found herself sitting across from Deputy Chief Roberts in his downtown office, 30 floors above the bustling streets of Los Angeles. The view was impressive, but Sarah's attention was focused on the man who'd become an unexpected mentor during her final days at the academy. The investigation is complete, Roberts said, sliding a thick folder across his desk. Bradley, Morrison, and Ricci are facing criminal charges for conspiracy and filing false official documents. Morrison's cousin received a 5-year ban from
any city employment. The whole network has been dismantled. Sarah nodded, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't expected.
What about the other trainees, the ones who weren't involved? Most completed the program successfully. Several have specifically requested you as a training partner when you join the force. Roberts leaned back in his chair. Which brings me to why you're here. We want you, Sarah. Not just in LAPD, but in SWAT specifically. Your academy performance was extraordinary. The offer was everything Sarah might have wanted 6 months ago when she first stepped off that bus at Riverside Academy. Elite unit, excellent benefits, the chance to serve and protect in one of America's most challenging urban environments. But something had changed during her time at the academy. The sabotage and betrayal had forced her to dig deep, to rediscover strengths she'd thought were lost with her military discharge. She'd proven herself capable of handling anything law enforcement could throw at her. But she'd also realized that proving herself wasn't the point. Chief Roberts, I'm honored by the offer, truly, but I need to ask you something first. Go ahead. During the investigation, did you find any evidence that the Academy's leadership knew what was happening, that they allowed the harassment to continue because they wanted to see if I could handle it? Roberts was quiet for a long moment, his expression carefully neutral. What makes you ask that? Instructor Torres made some comments that suggested he suspected what was going on. If the Academy was using Bradley's harassment as an unofficial test of my resilience, I need to know. Roberts sighed and opened another folder. You're perceptive. Yes, Torres suspected something was happening. He documented his concerns and reported them to Academy leadership. The decision was made to let the situation play out while maintaining safety oversight. Sarah felt a chill, so I was being tested. My harassment was approved as a training exercise. Not approved. Monitored. There's
a difference. Roberts leaned forward.
Sarah, law enforcement is full of people who will test you, challenge you, try to undermine you. Gender, military background, outsider status. There will always be someone looking for a reason to prove you don't belong. What happened at the Academy was wrong, but it was also realistic preparation for what you'd face in the field. The honesty was brutal, but Sarah appreciated it. At least now she understood the full scope of what she'd endured.
I need time to think about this, Sarah said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. The offer stands indefinitely. That afternoon, Sarah drove to a small park overlooking the ocean, a place she'd discovered during her early days in Los Angeles when the nightmares were worst and she needed space to breathe.
She sat on a bench watching waves crash against the rocks below, trying to sort through the complex emotions swirling in her mind. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. Coffee later? Want to hear about the job offer? Sarah smiled. Lisa had become a genuine friend during the academy chaos. Someone who'd stood by her when standing by anyone was risky. Sure. Usual place, 6 p.m. They met at a small cafe near the academy where they'd often grabbed coffee after particularly brutal training days. Lisa arrived with news of her own. She'd accepted a position with the LAPD's Community Policing Division, following her passion for working directly with neighborhoods rather than tactical operations. So, Lisa said after they'd ordered, Roberts
made you the offer? SWAT position, full benefits, fast track to senior positions, everything I should want. But Sarah stirred her coffee thoughtfully.
I keep thinking about why I went to the academy in the first place. I was lost, trying to find direction after leaving the military. I thought I needed external validation, needed to prove I still had value. And now I know I have value regardless of what uniform I wear or what title appears on my business card. The question is what I want to do with that knowledge. Lisa smiled. That sounds like someone who's figured out the difference between needing a job and choosing a purpose. That evening, Sarah called Lieutenant Walsh to discuss the LAPD offer and her reservations. Walsh listened patiently as she worked through her thoughts out loud. Sarah, he said when she finished, let me tell you something I learned after 20 years in uniform. The question isn't whether you're good enough for the job. You've proven that beyond doubt. The question is whether the job is good enough for you. What do you mean? You have skills and experience that are valuable in many fields. Law enforcement is just one option. Private security, corporate consulting, training and education, government contracting. There are dozens of ways to use your abilities. Don't choose law enforcement because it's the obvious path. Choose it because it's what you genuinely want to do. The next morning brought unexpected clarity. Sarah woke from the first nightmare-free sleep she'd had in months, and she realized something had shifted during her academy experience. The hypervigilance and anxiety that had plagued her since leaving the military had eased. Not because the memories were gone, but because she'd proven to herself that she could handle whatever challenges came her way. She spent the day researching alternatives to traditional law enforcement. What she found was fascinating: a growing field of security, consulting, threat assessment, and training services that valued military experience and specialized skills. By afternoon, she'd made her decision. Sarah called Deputy Chief Roberts and requested a meeting. 2 hours later, she was back in his office, but this time her purpose was different. "Chief, I'm grateful for the SWAT offer, but I'm going to decline." Roberts raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why?" "Because I realized that my best contribution isn't as a sworn officer taking orders and following protocols. It's as an independent consultant who can bring military expertise to law enforcement training and operations." Sarah outlined her vision: a consulting firm that specialized in advanced tactical training, threat assessment, and crisis response. She would work with agencies like LAPD on specific projects, bringing military-grade expertise to civilian law enforcement challenges. "I want to be the bridge between military and law enforcement cultures," she explained. "Help agencies improve their training while helping veterans transition their skills to civilian applications." Roberts listened with growing interest. "That's actually a brilliant concept. We could use someone with your background to review our training protocols and help us incorporate lessons learned from military operations. Would LAPD be interested in contracting that kind of service?" "Sarah, if you can deliver what you're describing, we'll be your first client." 6 months later, Martinez Tactical Consulting was operating out of a small office complex in downtown Los Angeles with Sarah as the founder and CEO. Her first contract was with LAPD to redesign their advanced marksmanship program, incorporating techniques she'd learned from military sniper training. The work was challenging and rewarding in ways she hadn't expected. She was using her military skills in a meaningful way while maintaining the independence and flexibility she'd come to value. Most importantly, she was helping other veterans find their own paths into civilian careers. Lisa stopped by the office on a Friday afternoon, still in her LAPD uniform after a community policing shift. "How's the business going?" "Better than I expected," Sarah said, gesturing to a wall covered with certificates and commendations from various agencies. "We just signed a contract to train federal marshals in advanced tactical movement. Any regrets about not taking the SWAT position?" Sarah considered the question. Through her office window, she could see the academy in the distance where her journey had begun. She thought about Bradley and his crew, probably working security jobs somewhere, and still bitter about their disgrace. She thought about the challenges she'd overcome and the confidence she'd rebuilt. "None," she said finally. "I learned something important at the academy. Success isn't about proving yourself to other people. It's about finding work that uses your strengths in service of something meaningful." "Sounds like you found your calling." Sarah smiled, picking up a training manual she was developing for small-town police departments. "I think I did. Turns out, I didn't need to fit into someone else's organization. I needed to create my own." As Lisa left for the weekend, Sarah turned back to her work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new clients, new opportunities to make a difference. She'd started this journey looking for direction and found something better, the confidence to create her own path. The academy had tested her skills, her resilience, and her character. She'd passed every test, but more importantly, she'd learned that the real victory wasn't beating Bradley's score or surviving his sabotage. The real victory was discovering that she had the strength to build the life she wanted on her own terms. Outside her window, the sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Sarah watched for a moment, then returned to her work. She had a business to build, veterans to help, and a future to create. The SWAT team had thought she was a joke when she first arrived at the academy. In the end, the joke was on anyone who thought they could define her limits. Sarah Martinez had proven that the only opinion that mattered was her own, and she'd chosen to write her own ending to the story. It was a good ending, but more importantly, it was just the beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.